Hi, everybody. Ambassador Kárla Sand served in President Trump's first administration as ambassador to Denmark and Greenland. Prior to that, she was appointed to President Trump's Economic Advisory Council and currently serves as vice chair of the Center for Energy and Environment at AFPI. Ambassador, thanks for joining us.
Tim, it's great to be with you.
Let's talk about the Middle East region. During the Free Iran World Summit, you spoke about a couple of MEK members who were executed by the Iranian government. And some estimates say in the last year there's been as many as 1,600 people executed, which is more than 4 a day. That's just a constant throughout. What's your assessment of the human rights record of Iran, and what should the role of the United States and the West be in trying to deal with that human rights record?
Well, I think that President Trump is not a nation builder, and so he's not going to try to fix Iran's terrible human rights record. If he was, there would be no trade deal done with China because they have the world's worst human rights record. Look at the oppression of the Uyghur people by the Chinese Communist Party, for example. But if you talk about Iran and the fact that the incompetence and corruption of the Mullah regime has led to Iranian people have no water. Like there's tens of millions of people in Iran that don't have water. In fact, I saw Benjamin Netanyahu just came out and said, look, we want people to flourish even in Iran. We'll give you our technology, how we bring water to the people of Israel, for example. But President Trump understands that Iran was a threat, so he dropped bombs on the nuclear enrichment sites. Israel also did a lot of damage to Iran's military, but they're the number one exporter of terrorism. So there has to be change in Iran. And I think that this group we're talking about, the NCRI, or National Council of Resistance of Iran, is the group led by Meriem Rajavi that could, if the people decide, rise up and overthrow this very evil Mullah regime.
You mentioned Mrs. Rajavi, and she's been very careful to talk in terms of what they do not want. They're not looking for money from the United States. They're not looking for troops from the United States, but they would like the support of the United States in regime change. They've offered a 10-point plan. We'll talk later about that. But what can the United States do if it is not going to put money into that effort, if it's not going to put military side into that effort? What should the United States be doing to assist those who might offer a better future for Iran?
Well, I think the opposite of what the Biden administration did in the last administration, when we saw the cold-blooded killing in the street of young, beautiful people. They were shot right there and they were bleeding out on the street, and no one came to help them from the regime. And these were young people with a brilliant future. They were obviously educated. Joe Biden, rather than backing the people that were trying to rise up in a revolution, but in a mostly peaceful revolution against this evil regime, he supported the regime. He came out and supported the regime and didn't even say a positive thing. And that goes for the leaders around the, civilized world that talk about democracy every day. Well, here are the people of Iran, educated, young, industrious. They deserve to have a great country with opportunity like young people in the United States do. There's no reason that they shouldn't join the community of nations and have a great relationship and grow their economy, clean up the environment, have water for all Iranians. And that's possible if the so-called leaders around the world who talk about democracy every day will actually back the democratic people of Iran.
As a diplomat yourself, you have a good understanding of how important communication is between nations. Even when you have adversaries, if you can communicate, sometimes you can bridge some of that gap. But the United States, traditionally, there has been a change when a Democrat or Republican becomes president in a lot of the domestic policy. You might have a different approach to the economy or to the border or to education. But long-term history of the United States is the international policy remains somewhat constant. That has not been true with the last few presidents. Between Bush to Obama, Obama to Trump, Trump to Biden, you mentioned not doing what the Biden administration did. So let's contrast that for a minute, because the Biden administration, you correct me if I'm wrong, but my observation is the Biden administration had very few friends at all in the Middle East. They did not have a good relationship with Israel. His administration staff had literally worked against Netanyahu's election. So Netanyahu had very little interest in working with Biden. But at the same time, Biden had no relationship with the Arab community and with much of the rest. So contrast that with what we see right now out of the United States and President Trump.
Well, so Tim, I think that the contrast for me is that under the Biden administration, we saw Joe Biden and his administration trying to get very close and cozy with Iran, actually tried to bring back the JCPOA and give them a pathway to enrichment, allowing them to get to a nuclear weapon, which cannot happen per President Trump, and most Americans agree with him. But he also said terrible things about Saudi Arabia, a traditional ally of the United States. What the heck? So why would he do that? It's clearly ignorance that the American friends or allies should stay American friends. And if they're an enemy, let's try to make them a friend. And I think that's what President Trump does. He makes sure he can pick up the phone and call every world leader, and he wants a good relationship with that leader. And then we look at people like our new Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, and how he is very clearly putting down markers of what is acceptable and not acceptable. So I think that you will see closer relationships with the United States and I think all of the Arab world. I do believe that. That's what he wants. He wants prosperity around the world and good relationships.
I was watching one of your speeches and you cautioned people not to believe the disinformation coming from the mullahs in Iran. When we talk about the NCRI, and I mentioned they have a 10-point plan, how does that contrast with the current regime? What are the differences there? Because I'm not sure the American public follows that closely enough to have a clear understanding. Okay, there's an existing regime. There's some people that would like to be there. What's the difference?
Well, I think that we have to look at the current oppressive, very cruel and corrupt, incompetent mullah regime, but also the Shah regime, which assassinated people, put them in the gulag, was very tightly controlled, and a control economy. And then you see what the 10-point plan is talking about, which is a free market where everyone can participate in society, where women have the right to get an education, where there's freedom to marry who you want, to go out of the house without a male relative. What a concept for women. And to bring equality and fairness back to the Iranian people, where they have a judiciary, where people can go and have their case heard, and it's not corrupted. And you get representation, where you can start a business and they're going to encourage entrepreneurship. Where I think that it will be a great, if they can get it done, a great role model for the Middle East, because literally it will be an elected government, and there will be people creating the Constitution within 2 years after they change the regime. And I think that they looked probably very closely at the American Constitution to come up with their 10-point plan, because there is so much good in it with first of all, the equality, but also all the other tenets in the 10-point plan.
The regime, many people perceive the regime is weaker now than it has been possibly ever.
Yeah.
And so when the NCRI, who have for years talked about regime change, you've described it as the time is now. There's an opportunity. There's a moment in time. How and why? Why is the regime weaker? And how, in kind of a step-by-step, not a broad brush of, they need to gather. In a step-by-step process, what does the NCRI need to do to actually achieve their goal?
Well, Tim, I'm not going to tell them what to do, but there's going to obviously have to be a people's resistance where they rise up and they displace this regime. And what will happen? I think they said it within 6 months, they will have a government in place. This group, NCRI, is not looking to become the government. They're looking to have the people choose the government. I think that's exciting, to have representational government. It's It's very unusual in the Middle East. It's exciting to conceive this. But once they do that, once the train has left the station, they have the opportunity to have trade with the rest of the Middle East, to grow their economy. They won't have to undersell their energy to places like China because they'll be on the world market and be participating and have, think of it, imports and exports from around the world. So I think that the opportunity is now because they're so weak. Why? Because Israel attacked them. And we had no idea that they were so weak, that Israel was able to really decimate their forces and have surprise attacks, which I love. The art of war, Sun Tzu's book tells, to try to win the war without going to connect. Well, they pretty much took them out without any kind of combat. And then to have President Trump with this incredible dropping to take out the nuclear enrichment in Iran, these are great starts. But then we've got a very deadly Quds force, a well-trained RGC, well-funded because they don't fund the country. They don't build up the infrastructure of the country. They don't take care of the water for the people. They have this strong military. So that's going to be a challenge.
And I am certainly not asking you to draw out the blueprint. I'm merely asking what Americans should expect. When we talk about the people of Iran rising up, does that potentially have a violent element to it? Is that a requirement realistically to achieve the goal?
Well, I do believe that they have war fighters in place and they are armed. So I think that the people are ready. It's just going to be what lights the fuse. But Iran, the Mullah regime, has not been this weak, I think, since they came to power in the early 80s. So almost in my lifetime.
The NCRI and MEK have a well-established network. You mentioned that framework within the country. Yes. Should the United States and the West, should Europe be assisting in the expansion of that? Europe, not assisting militarily or not assisting, but should they be encouraging the people of Iran to at least realize there are options for themselves?
Well, I think that governments around the world like stability. They hate change. Because change means you need to get in touch and know a whole new set of players. So I think there is a reluctance to replace the Mullah regime. And I think that all of these world leaders that talk about democracy, democracy, democracy need to actually own what they say and not just say it, but do it. Otherwise, it's empty words. And we're not going to believe a word they say. But I do not know that the MEK and the NCRI are actually asking for. They've said to me over and over, we are not asking for arms. We are not asking for boots on the ground. We will do this. So I think that they are probably well supplied, but they need the leaders to support them and not work against them quietly or overtly.
Let's talk on a more personal level. When we talk about the NCRI, it's an organization led by women. Mrs. Rejvi has established a great reputation for herself. You've been around her. Tell me your impressions of her.
I think she is a great leader. She has very strong, solid people around her. They've created a framework. You could almost call them a government in exile. They have very loyal supporters around the country in Iran and then expat community around the world. And when you see the videos of these young men and women hiding their identity in Iran, talking about why they began to support the NCRI and the MEK, it's heartbreaking. They've lost family members to this bloodthirsty regime. Their family members have been tortured, or they themselves have been tortured and held in some of the Iranian prisons. And they can be taken for any reason. Sometimes they take whole families. It is so tragic. What this regime has done, and I can't even think of another regime in the world that comes close to this, is really, it's evil. They have taken a country and basically turned it into their cash register. They've enriched themselves to the tune of billions of dollars, left the people with very little infrastructure and poor infrastructure, and then built this military, strong military around them to protect their interests and export terror. It is a regime that should be changed. There's no question.
The NCRI has, for years and years and years, establish themselves, establish their goals, and talked in terms of regime change. We see a regime that appears to be weaker than it's ever been right now. And you've used that word, that phrase, the time is now. So what do you think the likelihood is that in the next, I won't hold it to tight, but next year or next couple of years, that we actually see what has been talked about for so long come to fruition?
I think it would be very exciting. It will. I don't think it's overnight. I think it's going to take time. It's going to be tough. It's going to be painful for the Iranian people. But at the end of the day, what do they get? They get self-governance. They get a constitution. They have freedom. The men and women will be, the boot of the mullahs will be off the neck of the Iranian people.
Ambassador, thanks for taking the time.
Thanks, Tim.